Now, a teacher in the UK who showed students a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad in a religious studies class is currently living in fear of being targeted by extremists. It comes after an angry mob of protesters gathered outside the school, Batley Grammar in West Yorkshire. Joining me now from London is writer and researcher Dr Rakib Ehsan. Dr Rakib, did I miss something? Since when does the UK have blasphemy laws? Why was this teacher suspended, and why did the headmaster issue a grovelling apology?
Well, firstly, Rita, I'd make the point that we don't have blasphemy laws. The remaining blasphemy laws that we did have in the UK were removed back in 2008. I made very clear with my writings since the incident, if you could call it that the reaction has been reckless and disproportionate. I felt that the headmaster, considering that it's come out that these materials were actually established in the school curriculum, I do feel that the headmaster, to an extent, really threw this teacher under the bus. And it's very interesting, Rita, that the teacher has a Muslim neighbour who's given a very positive character assessment. He said that the teacher and his family, they seemed really nice. They gave them halal sweets for Eid. This doesn't sound like a provocative anti-Muslim bigot here at all.
Absolutely not. And the teacher in question, I feel so sorry for him. He says he fears he will be murdered. He's in hiding, receiving a number of death threats. And he's told his family it's all over. He will never be able to return to his job or his home. Now, how can that be happening in the UK, a civilised country? How can someone who's done nothing wrong essentially have their life destroyed over something like this?
Well, Rita, I'd have to pinpoint some of the reactions to what happened in Batley. We had a local registered charity comparing the showing of these illustrations with acts of terrorism. And I felt that that was hugely insensitive, and it was a wild reaction, especially in a country that suffered Islamist terrorist attacks such as the 7/7 London bombings, the Manchester Arena bombings. And I feel that because of the nature of that reaction, that inflamed social tensions, but deeply unhelpful from a social cohesion perspective in a multi-ethnic, religiously diverse democracy such as ours. And I think that is precisely why we have a situation where this teacher unfortunately fears for his life and his family's broader safety.
Well, absolutely, and he's got a right to fear, because we saw what happened in France with a similar incident, an absolutely tragic outcome there with a teacher murdered. Now, you have written that Britain's Muslim population is mainly patriotic and dutiful, and they don't deserve to be tarnished by the actions of the religious zealots. But where are the counter-protests? Why aren't there people showing up at the school and saying, we stand by this teacher, we want him back, and we're not going to stand for him being victimised in this way? Because a lot of those protesters don't even have kids at the school. They're not connected to the school.
No, that's very true, Rita. So the school is based in a town called Batley. And there have been reports that men who have no connection to the school, they've come from out of town, from places such as Leeds and Rochdale, to participate in what I would consider to be intimidating gatherings. That's been said by parents who have their children at the school. I think the question on counter-protests, I'd make the point, Rita, ultimately, the vast majority of British Muslims are busy working hard, trying to make a living, putting food on the table. And they're also and what is interesting is that we still have COVID-19 social restrictions in place in the UK. So ultimately, the counter-protest would be breaching those restrictions. But that also leads on to the next point. There have been discrepancies in terms of the policing of different protests. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be an important part of the debate moving forwards.
Oh, absolutely. We've seen anti-lockdown protesters get a very heavy-handed response from the police in the UK, and yet these protesters seem to be breaking all sorts of restrictions, COVID restrictions, and there seems to be no action at all against them. Now, just finally, the French government has taken a very different tack. They're saying that public bodies should not use the term Islamophobia because it confuses stigmatisation of believers with criticism of Islam, and they say you should be able to criticise Islam without being labelled an Islamophobe. What are your feelings towards that decision by the French government?
Rita, I'd make the point that I reject the term Islamophobia. When I'm talking about genuine cases of discrimination against Muslims, I prefer using the term anti-Muslim prejudice, anti-Muslim hatred, because I feel that with the term Islamophobia, there's a dangerous conflation between those genuine cases of anti-Muslim discrimination, which has no place in any liberal democracy. There's dangerous conflation between that and legitimate criticisms of religious ideology. And ultimately, that is firmly embedded in British culture, that religious ideologies, they can be subject to criticism and they are open to question. And I do feel that all too often, Islamophobia is a label which is used to suppress dissenting voices, including dissenting voices within British Muslim communities.
Oh, absolutely. Moderate Muslims cop it as much as anybody else when they speak out about some of the extremists or Islamists who are the ones who engage in these divisive antics. Dr Rakib Ehsan, thank you so much for joining me today and giving us some insight into what's happening in the UK. Thank you.